Our topic this week is visual metaphors and graphical deception, which you will notice when you get to the checklist that it doesn't directly align because the reading is on multimedia components, which kind of is a little bit of it. However, this is the one part of the semester where there isn't a direct alignment between the reading and the topic and resources you're going to be looking at. But the timing works out really well for us to have this conversation. You may have noticed that in the last 2 weeks' discussions, you've each in some way either shared something that was deceptive and called it out or helped identify something that was deceptive or misleading in something that was shared, whether you were critiquing it or redesigning it. And even in some of the earlier pieces of the semester, this was happening, which is one of the things I love about this class. But this is where we really want to focus in on visual metaphors. So, for example, if you look at the breakdown graphic at the top about Nobel Peace Prizes, they're using the sizes of the circles as a visual metaphor. And in this case, it's not perfect. It's one of the better depictions. 28 is almost twice as large as 15. 14 is slightly smaller than 15. 7 is almost half the size of 14. So you can kind of see how it steps down. But we can all think of ways where this wasn't quite so true in terms of the metaphor. Or maybe it was just a creepy metaphor. And here's where I'll go back to that MTV graphic that we found 2 weeks ago that one of you posted. And those eyeballs were just bizarre. But they were trying to use a visual metaphor that, in my opinion, failed or fell flat. Sometimes graphical deception is overt. It's purposefully intended. And this is where we talk about ideas like a non-zero starting point. Sometimes when you're really trying to convey a message, having a starting point that's not zero will really help you distinguish the differences between what's being measured. But in some cases, it's just absurd. And I think I took a glimpse at this week's discussion, and one of you have already shared something that kind of falls in that land. That would probably be more covert. It wasn't necessarily intentional. It was accidental, or it wasn't meant to be blatant. The intent behind graphical deception, however, is what we also want to talk about. Do we think that what you pull for this week's discussion was done purposefully? Was it meant to mislead? Was it meant to send a particular message with a bias? And this is where we can even talk about media bias to some extent, how there's a story to be told and perhaps an agenda to be pushed, but who's telling the story, who's pushing the agenda, and who's listening to it. You'll also see on screen there's a Facebook post that is a story that absolutely cracks me up. This is actually from Idaho from a few years ago, just 3 years ago actually, where the amount of beer that fit into their 20-ounce cups was also the amount of beer fitting into their 16-ounce cups. And it was the shape of the cups that was influencing this deception. You can actually go find video clips of people testing this out. And the Idaho Steelheads are not the only professional team to fall victim to this issue. You can actually find issues of this all over the internet from other sports arenas and sporting teams where something similar happened. So what was the purpose behind it? Was it accidental? Did somebody just order something and it wasn't the right size, or it was misleading? Did they order from two different vendors? Similar area, but not directly connected. But then this is also time for us to start thinking about putting it all together. Go back to the wrap up of last week's discussion and think about how often you were talking about layout, color, and font. All of those things come into play when we talk about visual metaphors, using visualization of information and data, and that deception that occurs. So that's what I would really want you to think about as you read this week's chapter, look at the 2 articles I've shared, and even take the test that you'll see in the checklist. So with that, I hope you have a great week, and the checklist is up next. Please use the links on screen to navigate to the section of the overview you wish to access.